The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on a high-level expert consultation on digitalization, energy efficiency, and smart grids. If you could please hold for a couple of minutes, we'll begin shortly. Thank you.
Okay, hello everybody, and thank you for joining us today on our webinar on consultation on digitalization, energy efficiency and smart grids. We're very pleased you're able to join us today for this webinar. We have people from many parts of the world, so thank you for joining us. My name is Brian Motherway. I'm Head of Energy Efficiency at the International Energy Agency. I'm joined here in Paris by some of my colleagues, and I'm joined by many participants from many parts of the world. We want to make today's event interactive and discursive, so we very much welcome your feedback. Please feel free to add questions into the questions box on your interface at any time, and we will try to get to as many of those as we can during the discussion, or else we will follow up with you afterwards on the points you have raised or the questions you have asked. Also, after today's webinar, we'd be very happy to take your feedback. This is a consultation session. Many parts of the agency are interested in your views on these important questions. So please do contact us, and you can use the usual email channels or get us directly at energy.efficiency@iea.org. So in the spirit of interaction, we want to involve you straight away at the start of this webinar and do a little bit of live polling. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Edith Bayer, who's going to ask you a question.
Good morning, everyone. So in order to access this poll, please click either on a separate browser tab or just open your mobile telephone and go to www.menti.com and enter the code that you see up here on your screen, 342703. And as responses come in, we'll see the responses live on the screen that you see in front of you. So the first question is, how far along is deployment of digital technologies in your jurisdiction in the following areas? And we have 4 areas: smart meter rollout, distribution system control and operations, transmission system control and operations, and automation and control technologies. So in the right-hand corner, you'll see how many people have responded. And as you can see, the responses will shift back and forth as the responses come in. So one of the reasons that we're asking this question is that at the IEA, we're looking at various dimensions of digitalization. So we're looking at the customer side. This is where smart meter rollout is particularly relevant in engaging end-use consumers. But we're also looking at control and operation of distribution systems, transmission system control and operations, and also automation and control technologies among all size of end users. For those of you who may not see the code here, once again, the code is 342703. So one of the assumptions that sometimes seems to be in the room when we have these discussions about digitalization is that digitalization is here. We already see these technologies taking hold, but I think that this is a bit of a reality check, which is one of the reasons that we're asking the question. As we can see, we don't have many responses far to the right. So not many people are saying that there's a high deployment of any of these technologies along the transmission, distribution, end use side. So I think we'll leave a couple more seconds for the questions to roll in. And once we have the responses, even if you're still answering when we move on, we'll share these responses with everyone after the webinar.
Thank you, Edith. So do please keep your phones to hand and keep that interface ready, because we have some more questions for you later on. But for now, I'd just like to spend a few minutes setting the scene for why we're having this webinar and what we hope to discuss today. And I hope that sets the context for you and helps you make inputs that we'd love to hear from you on. First of all, after a few minutes of remarks from me, we're going to hear various international perspectives from different experts in different parts of the world, and then we're going to leave plenty of time for discussion. So do please have your questions ready to enter into the questions box on the webinar interface. And again, please keep in mind that we'll be going back to Menti a couple more times with the code 342703, and we'll have some more live polling during the course of the event. So by way of context, we're holding this event because for all governments around the world, the topic of digitalization and how it might change energy systems, creating both risks and opportunities, is very much a live question. And for us here at the IEA, all parts of the agency are thinking about these questions and trying to contribute to government's decision making through analysis, detailed modeling, and actionable policy guidance. There are many areas where digitalization might touch on the energy system, and we will talk about some of them today, including how it is changing changing energy efficiency, how demand response and demand side measures become more pertinent and in many ways more deployable, how digitalization might change grid resilience and the role of the power system, how systems integration might be affected, electricity security, changing markets, and of course a whole load of data areas, including power system data and indicators, tracking progress in smart grids, and tracking technology. So there are many dimensions that are relevant to governments that create very complex and important questions for the future of energy systems. For us in 2020, we will be looking at all of the core issues around electricity security, energy transition issues, affordability, and of course power system flexibility. We know that digitalization is already enabling collection of new large data sets, changing analytics, and of course improving control and automation that can contribute to all of these policy goals. But at the same time, power systems are facing a lot of pressures. They are growing under pressure of increased electrification. We see systems moving very strongly towards increased shares of variable renewables and distributed resources. All of these, of course, create considerable opportunities for generators, distributors, new types of market actors, and ultimately consumers. But of course, it also creates risk. And for the most part, as we saw in the poll there, we are not really in mass deployment phase for many of these technologies. We are still, relatively speaking, in pilot phases or in modest degrees of deployment compared to what might happen in the coming years. And of course, this is why the agency is working on these questions to help all of our governments become ready for the kind of changes that may be coming down the line. Let me spend a minute just talking about the few of the key areas the agency is working on across the sphere of digitalization. First of all, for energy efficiency, we firmly believe that digitalization will really change the nature of energy efficiency discussions across the world. We're already seeing shifts towards connectivity among devices, for example, in the home, where devices now talk to each other. Users can control things via their smartphones, supply and demand can be optimized. And now we're starting to see a shift towards that kind of systems smart thinking at the level of the entire grid, which of course can ultimately change the nature of energy efficiency from not just end use efficiency to systems efficiency, and brings up many questions around the role of the demand side and its flexibility and its efficiency in the context of integration of variable resources and overall optimization. In our view to date, networks have been slow to react to some of the changes that are underway, and that's why our World Energy Outlook team are putting a particularly strong focus on electricity networks in their work this year. We need to assess whether electricity networks are ready to meet the challenges we face in all countries, particularly in the context of accelerating energy transitions. And we are concerned that we see global investment stalling in the last couple of years in electricity networks, while at the same time spend on digital technologies seems to be continuing to rise. And therefore, it raises a number of important questions that WEO 2020 will look at, including whether we are taking electricity networks for granted today or whether we are giving them enough policy, market and investment focus. What is the role of electricity networks as key enablers for energy transitions? What, of course, will be the role of smart grids, which is a term on people's lips all over the world. And we'll be looking at this out towards 2040. And just to say, we are now starting to discussions. Our WEO colleagues are very interested in your views on these questions. Today will certainly contribute to those discussions, but you can see on the screen the timeline over the coming months in terms of interactions with experts such as the people we have on the webinar this morning towards the publication of the World Energy Outlook 2020 on the 10th of November, with a special focus on electricity networks. Next slide. Okay, turning to electricity security. As you know, the IEA for many decades has helped governments consider questions around energy security, particularly in oil and more recently even just as much in gas. But of course, electricity security is a core priority for governments around the world and therefore for the IEA. And we are urging policymakers in all governments to give more attention to electricity security, particularly in the context of society's increasing reliance on electricity and electricity systems in all parts and all sectors. And of course, electricity security shows some different characteristics to classic fuel security in terms of the extended interlinkages and the more dynamic markets and operations. And therefore, its analysis is different. In that context, the IEA is working on a major electricity security report, which will be published in the autumn of this year, that will cover a number of areas. First of all, how energy transitions and the role of electricity in that has implications for electricity security, particularly in the context of variable renewables and greater flexibility. Secondly, the very important question of cybersecurity and how that might influence electricity systems of the future. And thirdly, as we have already seen, the rising number of extreme weather events and what that means for resilience and robustness of electricity systems. So again, we are very keen to extend this discussion to all of our stakeholders, and you can look forward to that report later this year. Similarly, we see evolution in electricity markets in terms of use of existing assets and the need for additional assets, how technology, digital technologies can provide new functionalities and new ways of doing things. We already see very innovative companies doing different things in terms of providing ancillary services, flexibility, or system balancing in the market, particularly by interacting with users at a large scale enabled by digital technology. So all of these questions become urgent questions for governments, regulators, and market actors. Increasing system flexibility. Already we're seeing many countries having great success in growing renewable energy, particularly variable renewable energies like wind and solar in their system, which raises a lot of questions about how they are integrated into power systems and how flexibility on both the supply and the demand side can optimize the use of those resources to everyone's benefit, so that systems become cleaner and more affordable, and we drive an energy transition driven in part by the underlying opportunities created by digital technology. So these are some of the many questions we hope to discuss with all of our stakeholders over the coming months and years, and hopefully set some of the agenda for today. Before we move into some of our international speakers from different parts of the world, I would like to welcome some opening remarks from our colleagues in the Italian government, and I would like to hand the floor to Giovanni Brunelli from the Italian Ministry for the Environment, Land and Sea in Rome. Giovanni, you're very welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? I guess so.
Yes, we can, Giovanni. Please go ahead.
Okay, very well, thank you. So, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Brian, for this opportunity. This opportunity allows me to share the Italian commitment on fostering smarter low-carbon electricity systems and to introduce our proposal to use the best available technologies to contribute to this ambitious target, including also providing financial and technical support to other countries. And in this regard, last November, the Italian Ministry of Environment gave a voluntary contribution of 6.5 million euros to IEA for this output: energy efficiency policy analysis and implementation to support work on smarter digital power infrastructure to enhance energy efficiency, resilient systems, and energy transition. You can see that this is an extremely challenging and driven proposal that focuses on how smarter and digital power infrastructure may allow for the seamless, optimized, and efficient interaction of electricity system elements on both the supply and the demand sides. The Italian project is expected to focus on the policy, regulatory, and investment context that need to mobilize the grid infrastructure investments required by clean energy transition to ensure efficiency, reliability, and resilience across the entire energy system. And we have established a work program with the International Energy Agency, IEA, to which we have entrusted the coordination for the initiative. Within the project, the IEA will develop tools and guidance which will build on case studies and experience to the date. These will then be used to test new policies and disseminate new learnings. The project will be guided by a public-private partnership. I want to underline this. The latter will be called upon to provide, through market dynamics, the technologies needed to accelerate the energy transition and strengthen our effort to combat climate change. And it is clear that the pace of penetration of these technologies depends above all on the presence of intelligent infrastructures capable of efficiently connecting and ever increasing number of technologies elements. Millions of solar panels positioned on the roofs of houses, distributed batteries, electric vehicles being recharged. The proposal shows several benefits. Transformational impact. Smarter and digital infrastructures plays a key role in catalyzing the optimization of the interaction between supply and demand in an increasingly electrified future. Sustainable development co-benefits. Part of the reason for which infrastructure upgrades and development lags behind is the difficulty to quantify its environmental benefits in terms of local air quality. The guide will aim at developing easy-to-use guidelines for quantifying within a simplified framework the sustainable development co-benefits associated with smarter grid infrastructures. Again, replicable and scalable. We aim to develop several pilot projects, and we will ensure that each pilot project can be rapidly upscaled or replicated in upgrading, developing infrastructure around the world. Again, innovative and visible. The initiative will take stock of latest innovation in policymaking, technology and business models, thanks to the participation of qualified partners from both the public and private sectors. The role of cutting-edge technology in the areas of information communication technologies and telecommunications, storage and energy efficiency will be assessed. Innovative forms of financing and public-private partnership will be explored Visibility will be ensured through the campaign, which will be targeting both specialized stakeholders, but also the wider audience of infrastructure users. We wish other countries would join the project. For instance, we are particularly keen to reach out with countries that are interested in implementing digital smart systems. With those countries, we can partnership on two main levels. One level, by working together to define a guideline tool for the implementation of the digital smart infrastructure. The activity will be the result of an in-depth country analysis. The guideline will contain the several elements such as the policies, planning and regulatory, and assessing possible necessary organization and institutional changes, the mapping of relevant technologies, and the development of diagnostic grid smartness index to verify the level of smartness of grids, the identification of investment requirements, and the most effective financing mechanism, the quantification of greenhouse gases and the non-greenhouse gas benefits articulated within the SDG framework. Another level is the second level will be the implementation phase by working with the countries on the development of specific pilot projects. Indeed, we do aim to make this project bigger than now it is, so that we are also looking for countries that want to support the project itself or want to contribute by providing inputs. As you can see, Italy, with a valuable support of IEA, stand ready to play an active role in the technology deployment for smart grids to unlock the cost-effective potential of energy efficiency. So, dear friends, I wish you a pleasant continuation of the webinar, and I thank you very much.
Giovanni, thank you very much for your intervention and for the very clear explanation of Italy's goals in this work. And I think it's very impressive to see your focus on global engagement, public-private collaboration, and your strong call for other countries to get active in this work. And of course, we would very much like to thank you for your support of the IEA and for your collaboration with us to work on these very important topics. So thank you very much. And I think that helps set the context for the further discussion. So in order to involve everybody further, I'm going to hand back to Edith now for another live polling question.
Okay, everyone. So if you can go back to menti.com and enter again, if you haven't exited, if you can just stay with this throughout the webinar, it'll make things faster. The code again is 342703. And we should see the question coming up in a moment. Okay, so the next question is your jurisdiction ready to deploy the following demand-side resources? So the first is demand response, second rooftop PV, behind-the-meter storage, and end-use energy efficiency measures. And I see we already have almost 80 responses. And as you can see, a bit like with the question on penetration of digital technologies, we see that a lot of people think that their jurisdictions are not ready to deploy these resources. So while we talk a lot about the importance of demand-side resources as a cost-effective way to meet the flexibility and changing needs of electricity systems, we seem to be quite far still from fully deploying these resources and from being ready to. So one of the issues that we'd like to talk about today is what the regulatory barriers are and what the enablers are in order to fully deploy these resources. Okay, so I think that with that we'll have a few more questions for you a bit farther along. But what I'd like to do now is to introduce our speakers for the day. So today we have, we're very pleased to have three speakers. Twarat Sutabut from the Ministry of Energy in Thailand, Inspector General of the Ministry of Energy in Thailand. His presentation will be followed by a presentation by Weini Chen, who is Chief Strategic Officer for the Sustainable Energy Development Authority of Malaysia. And last but not least, we'll hear from Reena Suri, who is the Executive Director of the India Smart Grid Forum. So we're going to change the order around a little bit, and we're going to begin with the presentation by Dr. Weini. Dr. Weini, we're going to hand the floor to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Edith. And just very quickly, are you able to view my slides?
Not yet. They should be up momentarily. Yes.
Okay, let me know if you are able to view. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Edith, and also to the IEA for giving me this opportunity to share about Malaysia's first ever pilot run of our P2P energy trading. But first of all, perhaps a quick background on the government agency that I am serving. SEDA, or Sustainable Energy Development Authority, is a government agency reporting to the Ministry of Energy. We are established back in September 11 under the Sustainable Energy Development Authority Act. Our primary functions are to implement the feed-in tariff scheme and also to advise the minister on issues relating to sustainable energy. So a bit about my country. Malaysia lies along the equator, and our country is made up of, you can see from the map here, the East and West Malaysia, and we have a population of around 32 million. On the electricity front, as of the end of 2018, our total installed capacity is just over 34 gigawatts, and I'm largely based on fossil fuel, 77%, from coal and gas. Renewable energy, excluding large hydro, is 6%, and if we include large hydro, then renewables is nearly 23% of the national power mix. Now, large hydro to us is defined as any capacity above 100 megawatts. Now, in Malaysia, the pioneering renewable energy program is the feed-in tariff, which was introduced back in 2011. And during that time, the feed includes solar, biomass, biogas, and small hydro. However, in the past few years, the price of solar has come down so tremendously that solar has exited from the feed scheme and spawned two new other RE programs. And these are the large-scale solar, which is based on a reverse auctions that is implemented by the Energy Commission of Malaysia. And we also have the net energy metering for rooftop applications that is implemented by us. Now, our last national RE policy that has enabled the implementation of the FEED was approved by the Cabinet exactly 10 years ago. Since then, we have not had any subsequent RE policy. So in this regard, last year, SEDA was mandated by our ministry to come up with a renewable energy transition roadmap that will actually chart the path to actually show how we can achieve the government's committed RE target of 20% in the national power mix by 2025, and also to develop aspirational RE scenario up to 2035. Again, as a reminder, the 20% excludes hydro that is more than 100 megawatts. Now, within the roadmap, we have studied into the resource potential for solar, bioenergy, and small hydro. And of these resources, solar has the highest technical potential, around 269 gigawatt, around 210 gigawatt for ground-mounted, 42 gigawatt for rooftop, and 17 gigawatt for floating solar applications. Now, in the same roadmap, the P2P energy trading is deemed as one of the strategies to drive the distributed renewable energy generations in the country. Now, while the roadmap was still in progress of development, SEDA has decided to come up with a pilot run of the P2P so we can understand how this concept can be operationalized from the perspective of technical and regulatory requirements, and also to understand the business model behind it. Now, the concept of the P2P is quite simple. Solar prosumers can sell their excess solar electricity through the grid to other electricity consumers. This pilot run currently operates within a regulatory sandbox, which is approved by our Energy Commission, and it allows our NEM prosumers to actually sell their solar excess electricity to other consumers in a sandbox. Otherwise, without the sandbox, you can't just sell it to anyone. You have to sell it only to the retailer. Now, as this is the front of a meter business model, the Energy Commission has also come up with an interim network charge, which the consumers have to pay. Now, our P2P platform is provided by Power Ledger. The platform is based on blockchain technology. Smart meters are used as IoT devices which interface between the physical and the logical levels. Now, smart meters are used to capture energy data and transmit to the data aggregator, which in turn formats the energy data so that it complies with the platform's protocol. Now you can see from on the right-hand side here, it says here the pilot run is to span over a period of 8 months, in which the first 2 months is intended to test the technical integration, as well as to have the rules of the sandbox meted out. And for the first 2 months, there will be no financial transaction in the alpha run. So once we have cleared the alpha run, the next phase is to go through the beta run. And the beta run will include financial settlement between the prosumers and the consumers. So the alpha run actually started in November last year. And all in all, we have in total, you can see from the chart here, we have 5 prosumers and 5 consumers who took part in this run. In total, we have over 5 megawatt for prosumers, and those consumers, actually 2 of them also have solar on their rooftop. So all in all, the total solar capacity in the sandbox is nearly 6 gigawatts, sorry. The P2P prices are also preset in this sandbox run. The prosumer's margin for the P2P is capped at 10%. And the consumer savings as a result of purchasing from the P2P is kept at also around the same, around 10 to 11%. And on a monthly basis, you can see from the chart here, the total energy available for trading is around 27,000 kilowatt hour. Now, in an ideal scenario, we hope to achieve zero, close to zero spillage to the grid. But in reality, after a few months of alpha testing, the spillage is around 15%. Now, spillages are financially not beneficial to the prosumers because under this pilot run, the retailer is not obliged to pay for any excess electricity that is spilled to the grid. So let me explain to you in this slide. Now, this slide is a snapshot of a P2P energy trading platform of a prosumer in November last year. Now, this chart shows the amount of energy sold by a particular prosumer. The green bar indicates the sell to P2P, while the gray bar indicates the spillage. Now, this chart is actually quite good because it shows that most of the excess solar electricity is sold to P2P and only a little is to the grid. So what is the status of the pilot run at the moment? Firstly, I think we realized that 2 months is too short to sort out the rules and the technical requirements for the sandbox and look for suitable consumers and consumers. So the alpha in the end was extended another 2 more months, and we are expecting to start the beta by this month, meaning that the beta will run for 4 months instead of 6 months. So what are the key takeaways? Now, worldwide P2P energy trading is still new, but recent studies have shown that P2P can facilitate energy management within the grid system by allowing prosumers to monetize their RE investments through this platform. Now, additionally, the P2P can help balance local generation, especially if energy trading is carried out within the local distribution grid. And this, in turn, we believe can help to reduce congestion and losses at transmission level, and hopefully also reduces grid investment and maintenance costs. Now, from the energy demand perspective, through the P2P, it is also hoped that the prosumers can be incentivized to manage their energy usage so as to maximize returns from the sale of their solar electricity. Now, this is akin to the concept of negawatt, in which consumers are rewarded for energy not utilized. So similarly, when prosumers reduce their electricity consumption, this will allow more solar electricity to be sold and in turn optimizes energy arbitrage opportunities. Now, lastly, in Malaysia, we have a net energy metering at the moment. Now, net energy metering requires that solar is actually installed on site. And there are many who cannot take part in NEM, and they have constraints in having a dedicated rooftop space. Like for me, I live on high-rise buildings, so I cannot ever have solar PV on my rooftop because I just don't have a rooftop. So hence P2P will be able to support the concept of a virtual NEM, which allows consumers to enjoy solar energy which is located off-site. And today this makes a lot of economic sense because prices of solar in Malaysia has already reached gas parity, and it is cheaper to utilize solar energy compared to the regulated tariffs sold by the electricity retailer. Now, additionally, P2P platform also has the ability to aggregate smaller RE generations to form VPPs for power pooling. The converse is also true. The P2P platform enables energy assets such as large-scale energy storage to be fractionalized and provide this storage as a service. Now, this is my final slide, and so far I've shared about the benefits of the P2P. However, in all honesty, we do have our share of challenges as well, and we can conclude that technical challenges that can be readily overcome. To this end, the key challenges remain with issues such as regulatory readiness. This is in particular when Malaysia has a highly regulated electricity market, and we're still at the early cusp of an electricity market reform. The speed of the reform will determine how extensive the P2P can be implemented post the trial period. And additionally, there is also a need to determine what is a fair network charges for the P2P when the project eventually goes live. For example, now we have this discussion whether should the network charges include an avoided cost due to capacity payment for the conventional power plants, such as the coal and gas. And the argument is that solar is unable to provide firm capacity when needed. And I truly appreciate your views on this. And lastly, there needs to be a strong political willpower to push this agenda through. Some of you might be aware, Malaysia just had a change of government last week. So we are hopeful that the newly minted government will continue to support energy democracy and prioritize the climate agenda. Thank you very much for listening.
Dr. Wainey, thank you very much for that great intervention. I think that raised very many interesting questions that I'm sure we'll come back to in the question and answer session. But let's move now to our second speaker, who's Reena Suri, who's the Executive Director of the India Smart Grid Forum. Reena, you're very welcome, and the floor is now yours.
Thank you so much, and pleased to have this opportunity to present and be part of this webinar. Unfortunately, not in person, but I'm glad to be connected offline. So I'll be presenting the Indian sector overview, but before I start, I would like to just quickly go through what India Smart Grid Forum is and what are we involved in and what is our contribution so far. So we're a PPP initiative of Ministry of Power Government of India. and were established in 2011. We are responsible to accelerate the smart grid developments, which the government is planning over the last few years and in future, to accelerate some of the projects and help the power sector to grow further and become smarter. We have, it's a member-based organization with over 200 members coming from the ministry, utility, technology providers, academia, research institutions. We have evolved as a think tank on smart grid and smart cities. We work with our members on various working groups, thematic working groups, which are listed here. We have been doing policy advocacy, supporting standards development on various new technologies that are coming in. Particularly, to name a few, we have worked on the smart meter standards, and we're currently working on the smart electric vehicle charging standards with the government. We do training and capacity building and knowledge dissemination, and work with the regulators also to help them have the right regulations in place for the development of the sector. With that, I would like to take you through give you an overview of Indian power sector. It is we work on one nation and one grid. India has the third largest power system in the world, and we have a capacity of 370 gigawatt of energy, and supplying energy to 300 million customers, with one grid covering more than 3 million square kilometers of operation in one frequency. Our transmission system is very smart and modern with 800 kV and 500 kV of HVDC lines, 765 kV and 400 kV of AC lines. We have 5 regional grids with regional control centers established to manage the transmission between the grid, and 1 national control center is there to overview the operations. Each state in India has its own load dispatch center. And electrification in India has been a little slow, but over the past few years, Indian government has really picked up and has been able to electrify 26.3 million households in a very ambitious and a remarkable target of 17 months completed in March 2019. With that, we have connected to 619,000 villages, and 99% of 0.99 households have been connected, which also has given another challenge to be able to supply electricity 24/7 to each household, which is now connected to the grid. And the grid, which also need to cater to so many million new customers which have been added. So what kind of infrastructure upgrades are required? So that planning also has happened parallelly. We have central government and state government owned generation, transmission and distribution companies, as well as private generators are there, transmission companies and distribution companies, some parts of India, but the role of private sector in generation is 40%, but transmission distribution is way less than 5% with private sector. We have about 72 distribution licenses all over India. Some states have 2 to 3 licenses, some have more than 5 licenses also. And electricity in India is a very regulated commodity, and Central Electricity Regulatory Commission regulates the power sector. With each state has its own regulatory commission which regulates the electricity of that particular state. Talking about the renewable energy scenario, we are pursuing we started with a very ambitious target of 175 gigawatt by 2020, which has now been enhanced by the government to 450 gigawatt by 2030. We already have commissions close to 87 gigawatt of RE that contribute about 8% of the total energy consumed presently, which also includes the hydroelectric, which does not include the hydroelectric plants, which is about 87 gigawatt in addition. And majority of the renewable energy is coming from the wind, which is about 40 gigawatt. And we have, to meet the Paris Agreement, our government has further, as I mentioned, has increased the target and has a new target of 450 gigawatt by 2030. And most of the new renewable energy we envisage it coming from solar and wind, including the solar wind offshore plants that are being set up. Now, 450 gigawatt is expected to contribute to an overall 40%, more than 40% of the energy requirement of India. Now, with the addition of renewable energy, is Indian grid ready for so much of integration of renewables in the existing grid? There was a lot of questions around that, and how we are working towards that is that, as I mentioned, transmission grid in India is already smart, with 5 regional control centers and 1 national control center managing it, and it has state-of-the-art communication and automation systems with SCADA, DMS, and EMS, and about 1100 plus phaser management units are already in place. We have green corridors managing the high voltage transmission lines, connected large solar and wind farms that connects the renewable generation with the pooling stations. Government has also established around 11 renewable energy management centers with sophisticated tools of RE forecasting integrated with the weather forecasting data under implementation, so that the renewable is, we can predict the renewable generation and are able to cater to the demand through renewable energy efficiently. REMCs are in 7 different rich RE states of India, northern, western, and southern regions, and 3 in the respective regional control centers, and 1 at the national control center. And India Smart Grid Forum estimated about 17 gigawatt hour of energy storage systems that will also get integrated to the 175 gigawatt renewable energy by 2022. With the unpredictable and the time-specific generation of renewables, storage is definitely going to play a very key role. And we have already started pilots around storage that are being undertaken in different regions, and results are being evaluated. Smart grid and digitalization scenario in India. The private sector utilities in India are very few, as close to 5% of the total is distribution is managed by the private sector. And particularly in the state of Delhi, where we have Reliance and Tata managing, then Mumbai is Adani is there, and then Calcutta is CESE is managing. Ahmedabad is also now being managed by a private utility. So they have implemented several automation and IT systems, and they are at very advanced stage of their smart grid journey. However, our other distribution companies, which are public-owned distribution companies, are still struggling to meet the demand, as well as they are in huge losses, close to in between 15 to 40% of losses they are incurring in total. So under a program by Ministry of Power, where government had funded 1,400 large towns to have implement their basic IT and automation systems in their electricity distribution, AMR for 11 kV feeders and distribution transformers, GIS mapping has been done for all the electrical assets and consumers, and IT networks and call centers, billing system, etc. are in place. Government started in 2011, 11 smart grid pilot projects were implemented with the customer base of 5,000 to 35,000 in various states in India, with different distribution companies, to understand on a pilot basis how successfully it can be implemented before rolling out larger projects in India. So we have completed 11 smart grid projects, and now we are rolling out bigger smart grid projects already. And Minister of Power has made plans for launching 250 million smart meters in next 4 years, which is a very, very ambitious target. And soon 100 more towns will also be equipped with the SCADA and DMS facility. So this is an announcement which will be made very soon, and the planning is already on. There are a lot of questions around smart meter, data security, and should it be prepaid meters or postpaid meters, so which we are having a lot of stakeholder consultation meetings with the different ministries and stakeholders to be able to have the right plan in place for India for such a huge number of smart meters to be in place. With that, I conclude my presentation, India is moving towards a smart grid journey, but there are a lot of different aspects to be looked upon. A lot of policy initiatives have to be done. A lot of investments have to be done around towards making this a very successful journey of smart grid, modernized grid for India. Thank you so much. And with that, I conclude my presentation. I'm be happy to have questions from your side.
Thank you, Rina. Much appreciated. Thank you for the excellent presentation. So now we'd like to go to our third speaker, and just a reminder to everyone that after the speakers have finished, we'll turn to Q&A, and we'll be reading out some of the questions that come up in the question box. So please type your questions into that box. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Twarath Sutabut, who is the Inspector General of the Ministry of Energy of Thailand. Twarath, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Amy, and good morning, everyone. I'm from Thailand. I just would like to show you my 6 pages PowerPoint presentation on 4 different topics. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Well, my presentation today is mainly to update you what's going on in Thailand. First of all, Thailand energy situation that would give you an update on how advanced that we have been in the recent years. And also I would like to update a little bit on the digitization and energy efficiency, as well as the smart grid applications in my country. And last but not least, just to summarize what would be the next step to be taken in the soon future. Next, please. First of all, Thailand is the size of France, is a country of the size of France, with a population of 66 million people. GDP right now, approximately 300 billion euros, with electricity generation capacity of 49 gigawatts as the total capacity. But our peak demand is approximately 32 gigawatt as of last year. The renewables energy penetration in our electricity system stand for 3.7%, including hydropower from neighboring country. Next slide, please. We have taken the step to demonstrate the digitizations and energy efficiency through using the funding from our Energy Conservation Fund, or ENCON Fund. We have demonstrated 72 projects in which would incorporate the Internet of Things, or IoT, in commercial buildings and also factory. So far, we granted 126 million baht to 72 projects, and with 2 years of implementation, we have access that the potential energy saving could achieve approximately 206 million baht as the energy saved using this digitization. The technology mainly is a feedback control. Most of our commercial buildings use the feedback control on the air conditioning and also heating and cooling process. but the factory application on the factory is on a wide variety of things. Next slide, please. The other applications that Thailand is currently employed is to demonstrate smart grid projects, but it's still on a test-based basis. We have two test-based streams. The first one is the on-grid or embedded nanogrid, in which we have the sandboxes on the phase one that try to promote the peer-to-peer and the behind-the-meter concept. One of the example is the project called Block T77, in which using the Power Ranger technology coupled with the blockchain technology. On the other application, we try to promote the off-grid application project for the smart grid, in which the main focus would focus on the islands where it's unelectrified, as well as the hilltop villages. And we have a few projects as listed on my presentation. Next slide, please. There are three applications of technology that has been deployed on the island or hilltop villages. The first one is the area-wide control, in which we control the flow of the electricity within the small parameters. The second application is to do a hybrid power plant at the very small scale or a community scale. Mainly is a solar and wind, and also one application with the hydropower. And this application could distribute to 100 households within the parameters of 5 kilometers. The third application is to deploy the solar home system and using the direct current system as well as the pay-as-you-go application. This is just being implemented recently, and we hope that it could grow a DC system market within the soon future. Next slide, please. From what we have implemented our demonstration project so far, we have concluding that the next step to be taken are two prongs. The first prong is to revise our policy and also to modify our regulations. The first policy that already been modified and relaunched by our minister very recently is to declare that Thailand has a vision of 100% electrification, and with a new policy called the community-based power plant, in which we would set aside a few megawatts of targets for off-grid applications. Also, very recently, we relaunched the new energy efficiency plan, in which also incorporate the demand response and the possible of wheel-to-grid application. Wheel-to-grid would utilize the battery within the EV that we are promoting as well. Last but not least, we have learned through many demonstration projects that rules and regulation, the current rules and regulation need to be modified and need to be changes to make sure that more digitization and more transformation could be further deepening into the system. The other point that probably the Thai government would take the step within the soon future is to have more grant to promote the Internet of Things technology coupled with energy efficiency targets, as well as a possible new round of the sandboxing project within the soon future. So that would be it from Thailand. I just would like to update that we have done a few demonstration projects and a lot of lesson learned need to be taken up and processed further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Trarat, for the excellent presentation, and thank you to all of our speakers. I'm sorry that we couldn't hold this conversation in person, but we're very happy that you could connect with us remotely and that we have so many participants in today's webinar. So before we move to the question and answer session, we're going to do another poll. So if you could turn back to whichever device or tab you are on for the Menti questions, we'll pull up the next question in one moment. Okay, so this was the last question, so we're going to launch the next question. Okay, so the next question is, what are the top 3 factors disrupting power systems today? And for this question, we're just answering you, we're asking you to just use whichever words come to mind, and we're going to see these words come up on the screen. So this is in this question is in the form of a word cloud, so we can see the bigger words are the ones that are coming up more often as questions come in. So appropriately, digitalization is sort of hovering in the center. But we also see, unsurprisingly, we see that renewables are pretty strongly anchored, solar, decarbonization. So we see both technologies and policies here driving the changes in power systems that we see today.
Edith, I think we see the key debate is how you spell digitalization, whether it's an S or a Z. I think we should spend more time discussing that question.
I see now that we have both spellings up on the screen, yes. So as we can see, it's really interesting to see some of the words that are coming up. And we also see storage playing a really big role here, energy efficiency. So I think what we're going to do, again, we'll send these around when they're finalized, so please keep sending your answers. But if we can go to the next question, we have one more question for you before we turn to the Q&A. So next question, what is needed to enable flexible, smart/digital power systems that leverage the demand side? And here, instead of a word cloud, we're just going to have your answers come up as we receive them. So we see here again a really big range of factors, which I think reflect different people's perspectives on this question. So we see a combination of storage, smart grids, we see different technologies. We also see the value for flexibility, which is a really big question. How do we ensure that flexibility is valued in terms of its time and location as well? We see policy will, market design, regulatory policies, which is unsurprising. And I think if we scroll down a bit, we'll be able to see some of the other responses that are coming in. Yep. So we're seeing, yeah. So I mean, we essentially see the value proposition coming up quite a lot. We see DERs in different forms. If you consider energy efficiency to be a DER, we see energy efficiency, we see demand response, we see storage, smart meters, which are an enabling technology. So really interesting to see these responses. So I think now we're going to move to the question and answer portion of the discussion. Thank you all for your responses, and again, we'll share them with you after the webinar.
If we could start with the first question, and I would like to ask Rena a question. I thought it was, Rena, we still have you there?
Yeah, I'm still there.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I was just interested in, we've got a couple of questions on our question box about your smart grid pilots. And you talked about the pilots that engaged up to 35,000 customers. Could you say a bit about the customer experience? Were they actively participating? Were they aware they were in a smart grid trial? Did it make their experience different in any way? Anything you could say about the customer experience in the smart grid trials would be interesting, please.
Sure. I mean, talking about 35,000 customers in India, the population, as we all know, is quite huge, and we cannot have any pilot with a justified result without having huge numbers. So our pilots had these kind of numbers of customers involved, and definitely we had a lot of different reactions to smart meters or these kind of smart technology coming into their homes. What will be the change? What kind of disruptions will be there? So our companies were aware, and then we had also were involved in one of the pilots where we had done a customer engagement program to be able to most effectively engage customers. We went around, we checked which are the best way to connect, places to connect with the customer, which is the best medium to connect with the customer, and what kind of various age groups we have of the customer to be able to connect with the best effective tool, be it social media, be it through some advertisements, some street plays also we had conducted to be able to effectively convey the message of the benefits that will be coming along with this kind of pilots which are being done. But of course, they were skeptical about their connections, their tariffs going higher, and the billing at the end of the month will be much higher than what they've been charged earlier. But in India, as you know, we have also this problem, a major problem of theft, which is very huge in some of the areas in India. And that was also one of the reasons where customers didn't want this technology, which can auto control systems to be in place, to be that the thefts will also be detected. So these kind of retaliations with the reasons, as I mentioned, were there. But right now, we have moved on from that. They all are in successful stages. And now we are one of a new pilot that we are taking up is on the design of tariff for time of use for the customers who are part of the smart grid pilots. So they can bring more efficiency into their system and be able to use shifting of loads to certain time zone and have benefits of reducing their loads and reduce the bill at the end of the day. So the others who retaliated and joined the pilot are now looking at this as an opportunity, and now see that they are not able to benefit from the not joining the pilot earlier. So we see this as another opportunity to bring more people onto this pilot. Bring on the smart grid. Those customers are willing to join. I hope I was able to answer your question on that.
Thank you, Rena. You answered that question very well. Edith, please.
Excuse me. So we have another question for Rena, just to follow up. So, people are quite impressed with the ambitions in India and are asking how this ties in with the Sustainable Development Goals, and how does it relate to affordability and fighting poverty?
Sorry, could you repeat the initial part of the question?
Yeah, the initial part is really a comment that it's really impressive to see what India is doing, but there's a question how the smart meter rollout, how the various projects in India relate to the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and to affordability and poverty.
So as I mentioned in my presentation, that with these ambitious goals India has, but India also, like our government, work towards reaching out the the last mile, where some areas which had never seen light in their homes, and they didn't know what life is with electricity in the house. Well, how can it benefit their children, their work, women in the house, with just having one electricity bulb in the house, and be able to have extended working hours with the electricity reaching them. So with this new scheme, we have been able to reach the last mile, and it has definitely helped their livelihoods, their education of their children. Women don't have to worry about not being able to cook later in the evening and have more productive time with other things and their children with the electricity reaching them. And in terms of sustainability, we are planning towards more, plans of upgrading the infrastructure to be able to sustain the grid that is now becoming even bigger and it's supposed to be unmanageable with so many million customers coming in. So I think government is working towards that. We're also looking at the smart meter rollout with prepaid plans, so that customers can prepay and and they know how much they will consume. This is the amount of money they can spend, and this is the amount of electricity they should be using in a day to be able to manage as per their capacity of paying for the electricity. So that is also something we are looking at before ambitiously rolling out such huge numbers of smart meters as well.
Thank you, Rina. If we could ask a question now of Dr. Waini. Dr. Waini, your presentation has generated a lot of interest among the questions we're receiving about the model you use in terms of the sandbox, and then what the difference between the sandbox and the real world will be in terms of the regulatory changes. So I wonder, could you say a few words about how you designed the sandbox and how you would see the transition, assuming things go well, from moving from the sandbox to the whole system in terms of regulatory design, please?
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, for us, the sandbox, the difference between the sandbox and what is going to be implemented in the life is that one of the biggest issues that we have to handle is the regulatory relaxation. For example, currently now we can only sell back to the utility, but we are not allowed to sell to one another. So for these to be able to deploy live, then the regulations would have to change for it. But the good news is that Malaysia is going through this regulatory reform on the electricity market. So if we have allowed this third-party access to the grid, then this will be able to deploy it live. And secondly, as shared in my presentation slide, moving on, the network charges would have to be determined for the live deployment. Currently, what we have is we're charging 6.3 ringgit cent per kilowatt hour, and that is quite highly discounted. And we are not charging any retail fee or the platform fee. So in real life, of course, these will have to be factored in. So what are the arbitrage opportunities in real life that has to be considered? Malaysia, one of the challenges is that our electricity tariff is still being subsidized in terms of natural gas. So it is quite difficult to remove fully this subsidy. We are still in the process of rationalizing the subsidy. So the ability to provide an equal playing field between conventional power and renewables, we need to address it. And lastly, as mentioned in my slide, there is a need for a political willpower to actually go through this process. We believe that the demand is there, because even in this early stage, the questions from the public is that why can't we go live immediately? I think we can't go live immediately because it is still a very new territory. We're still at a very early cups of learning. But we are hoping that by the end of this sandbox period, at the end of June, we can come up with a recommendation report to the ministry on how we can advance this to live deployment. Hope this helps to give some insights. Thank you.
It certainly does. Thank you very much. And I would like to ask a similar question for Thailand. Twara, we found your slides very interesting on the project, and I'd like to ask you similarly to comment on your thoughts about scaling up from project scale to larger scale. What are your plans in that regard, and what do you think the key issues will be for scaling up to larger scale?
Thank you. I think the Thai government right now is trying to do similar thing to what Malaysia and India is doing. Try to learn that what needs to be done to make sure that the new regulatory reform could be processed. And as Dr. Chen mentioned, that one of the objectives of the sandbox project is to make sure that we can do some relaxations of rules and regulation on the electricity market. Right now, we plan to do some relaxation in some area for the behind the meter concepts, as well as the peer-to-peer power trading. And also, we have on the tables to probably do a deregulation process on the power market to have a kind of a power pool, but it's not a national power pool. It would be just in a limited area. So that would scaling up the process, and we hope that the digital technology would help us to accelerate the process. The other scaling up is to do the 100% electrifications. Right now, Thailand is 99.5% of electrification, but still we still have hundreds of villages and islands that is still unelectrified. So we need some models that probably could utilize the microgrid technology or the digital technology that could help to bring electricity for those of 0.5% of the unelectrified populations of our country.
Thank you, Twarat. So another question for Dr. Wei Ni. It's a question related to cybersecurity. Which measures have you implemented in Malaysia to address cybersecurity concerns in rolling out these various projects?
Okay, thank you very much. I think one of the reasons why we actually use for example, we're talking about the peer-to-peer that we are doing. One of the reasons why we choose the blockchain technology is, of course, the fact that it is supposed to be very secured. Data is supposed to be immutable, and as well as there is transparency and there is a lot of traceability in the whole system. But we do realize that cybersecurity is a very important issue. And moving forward, we believe that the IT system will continue to develop, and as well as the security. Security by itself is a journey, it's never a destination. And similarly, when we talk about blockchain technology, which may be a solution, we are still not aware because the blockchain technology is still in the process of evolution. Today, it might be blockchain. Tomorrow, it might be a much more superior technology. So digitalization by itself is evolving. I think the key issue is that the cybersecurity must always be staying above it. I think there should be a national, in terms of security, in terms of ICT that looks after cybersecurity. And besides cybersecurity, of course, there are other issues like the responsiveness, the storage, and as well as the data recovery. We're talking about huge amount of data that we need to scale up if digitalization is to go nationwide.
Thank you very much. That's a very interesting answer, and I think interests a lot of people. Rena, do you mind if I ask you another question that's coming up, which is about, you mentioned in terms of the smart grids and the renewable integration and the great technological development you're doing, you mentioned different elements such as storage, demand-side response, forecasting. Have you a sense of how these different ways of integrating are going to work, which ones are more priority, or how they will all interact with each other in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we are piloting some of the different technologies to be able to understand which
Our technology is not that smart, apparently. We seem to have lost Rena there. Rena, are you still with us? Okay, we're no longer hearing Rena there, unfortunately. Sorry about that. We've lost the connection somehow. Twaras, could we go back to you? And I'd be interested in your views on, as you move towards scale, what are the key drivers? What makes policymakers and decision makers, ministers most interested? Is this about affordability? Is it about scaling up renewables? Is it about system resilience? What do you think are the key motivators for the kind of work you described in your presentation?
Thank you. I think can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Very good. Okay. I think the main objective of Thailand's policy is mainly about the security. And we would like to make sure that the security of electricity could be provided for everybody in the country. So we do believe that the visions of 100% electrification is one of the main pillars. And also we would like to see affordable and competition were taking place in electricity markets in Thailand. Right now, we do believe that the competition is not only from the power plant itself, but in the future, we would see the competition would come from the producers and the consumers, because the consumers seems to have more choices to produce their own electricity. And with that, because of the advanced technology on the digital platform, and also the cheaper prices of the solar power. So we do believe that in the future, the policy objective is mainly to make sure that electricity could be provided with the secure platform, and also we could achieve more competition that could bring down the prices in the levels of more affordable electricity prices in the country.
Thank you, Twaras, very much. And I hope we have re-established our connection with Rena. Rena, can you hear us? Can we hear you? No, we seem to have lost Rena. Apologies for that, Rena. We apologize to you that we can't hear you, and to our colleagues. But colleagues, that brings us towards the close of our webinar for today. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for participating. We're very pleased that so many of you are willing to participate in this webinar and to give us your inputs via the question box and also via the live polling questions. We will be analyzing all this data and following up with you. I think we've learned an awful lot, not just from our speakers, but from all our participants. I'd particularly like to thank our speakers, starting with Giovanni Brunelli and the Government of Italy for all its support, and then our three international perspectives from Dr. Wayne Chen, Rena Suri, and Twaras Subatrit. We're very pleased to have heard these great presentations that have given us a lot of insights in what's going on in different parts of the world. And finally, in closing, I will stress that this webinar is part of ongoing consultations where the IEA is very keen to hear from all of you about your experience, the issues you are addressing, and the ideas you are piloting and deploying, and the approaches you are taking. So please do follow up with us via the channels we mentioned earlier, and we hope to stay in touch with you. And we look forward to sharing our work with you later in the year through some of the key reports that will be informed by today's webinar. So thank you very much for joining us, and we hope to talk to you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Muted.